in the grim darkness of the far future. You might just find yourself praying for a simple, clean death. Because in Warhammer 40,000, there's a fate, arguably far worse, being turned into a servitor. One moment, you're a person, with thoughts and hopes. The next, you're a mindsker. Tool, it's a punishment so horrific that even the hardest hivegangers and most pious Imperial citizens fear it beyond execution. Welcome to a reality where not being killed is the scary part. Today, we're counting down the top 10 worst servitors you could become. These are the most miserable, grotesque, and soul-crushing forms of life the Imperium and its darker counterparts can subject a human to, from the merely dehumanizing to the truly nightmarish. We'll rank them from the least awful, relatively speaking, to the absolute worst fate of all. Grab your incense and say a prayer to the God Emperor. You'll need it as we dive into the darkness. Prepare yourself. After hearing this list, even a boring desk job in the administratum will sound like paradise. Cinto the Lois Servitor, human coitator. Kicking off our list is a type of servitor that's almost benign compared to what's coming, which tells you just how low the bar is. Meet the logist.servitors, also known as lexomats, calculant servitors, or simply human coitators. These unfortunate souls have been reduced to organic computers and scribes. If you ever complained about a mind-numbing desk job, imagine doing that job literally mind-numbed. A logist servitor might spend its existence deep in the labyrinthine offices of the administratum or aboard some starship, plugged into a coitator terminal. Its brain, what's left of it, is programmed to endlessly crunch numbers, transcribe data, and record droning meetings. Some have multiple mechandrite arms tipped with quills or data ports, copying documents with inhuman precision. Others are wired directly into communication arrays, processing astropathic messages or inventory reports day and night. They don't eat lunch, they don't sleep, and they definitely don't get coffee breaks. For example, a calligraphos servitor is essentially a living copy machine complete with extra arms to hold ink pens. It will perfectly duplicate any manuscript or take dictation of an administrative official's hours long. Decree all without a single complaint, because complaining is literally beyond its programming. Likewise, lexomat servitors can perform complex calculations or maintain vast archives in their augmented brains, replacing forbidden eye with lobotomized human CPUs. On the surface, being turned into an office appliance might sound better than, say, being sent to the mines. And indeed, as servitor fates go, the data drone servitor is relatively less physically painful. There's no heavy lifting, no gunfire, probably no one actively trying to destroy you. But make no mistake, it's a special kind of horror. Any spark of your personality or memory is snuffed out, leaving just enough intellect to obey and process. You're aware enough to crunch equations or take dictation, but not enough to question why. In rare cases, fragments of a servitor's old consciousness can bubble up, only to cause a mind lock, where it babbles gibberish until a tech priest reboots it. So you sit there day after day, maybe literally bolted to a chair or a cogitator bank, a tangle of tubes feeding nutrients into your pale flesh while electrodes dance across your skull. You stamp endless forms, update endless spreadsheets of imperial tithes, or monotonously recite warehouse inventory. You might have once been a clerk who fudged some numbers, or a scholar who angered the wrong official. Now you are the calculator for someone else. It's function without purpose, work without reward, an eternal cubicle from which you will never retire. The Imperium actually considers this a reasonable second chance for petty criminals or failed adepts, a way to serve the Emperor in spite of your failures. How generous! Of course, your service will be as an emotionless automaton doing paperwork until your biological components finally give out, if you're lucky. They might pop in a fresh organ or two and keep you going. There's always more paperwork. In short, the Lois Servitor is the least violent entry on this list, but it's deeply chilling in its own way. It's the slow death of self under flickering lumen strips and coitator hum stretched over decades, when the highlight of your existence is a moment of clarity where you almost remember who you were, right? Before a Mechanicus attendant wipes your brain again. You know you've hit rock bottom in the grim darkness. And yet, as bad as being a glorified human calculator is, trust me, it's only downhill from here. 9. Heavy labor servitor. Human forklift. Next up we have the heavy labor servitors, the tireless, pitiful workhorses of the Imperium. If you ever thought your manual labor job was tough, try doing it hardwired into your muscles with no off switch. Heavy labor servitors, sometimes just called drudges or technomats, are humans modified for brute strength and endurance, used for all the dangerous, grueling tasks no sane person would volunteer for. Mining toxic asteroids, clearing minefields by hand, hauling artillery shells across a battlefield under fire. It's all in a day's work for these poor cyborg beasts of burden. Picture this. Your arms have been replaced with hydraulic lift clamps or power shovels. Your spine reinforced with metal supports. Sounds almost like an upgrade until you realize you also have no free will and no sense of self-preservation. You're effectively a human forklift, and the tech priests will use you until you literally fall apart. Many heavy labor servitors end up in the depths of forge worlds and mining colonies. They trudge along in hellish conditions, blazing hot foundries, irradiated ore mines, airless voids of space where normal unaugmented workers would quickly perish. It doesn't matter if the work slowly cooks your remaining flesh or if a minor accident takes half your face off. As a servitor, you're expected to keep going anyway. Your overseers certainly won't waste precious resources on safety gear for a lobotomized slave. If anything breaks on you, that is, they'll patch it up with some bionics and send you back to work. If you cease functioning entirely, there's always a queue of other convicts waiting to be converted to replace you. On the battlefront, variants of heavy servitors carry ammo and repair equipment under fire. Astro Militarum engineers, battlefield tech priests, often have a few plotting behind them. Great hulking figures with welding torches for hands or crate lifter claws. Maybe an ammo hopper built into their back. Enemy shooting at you, they won't flinch. These poor souls will walk straight out of a trench into gunfire, lugging a heavy bolter case because their programming says so. Needless to say, battlefield servitors have a short life expectancy, which grimly is fine by the Imperium. Better the mind-wiped pack. Mule gets blown to bits than a thinking soldier. Some especially miserable examples include servitors used in hive, city waste recycling, waiting knee-deep in chemical sludge to unclog toxics, pipes, scraping out industrial runoff with their bare mechanical hands, or construction servitors who literally get built into the infrastructure. There are whispered stories of servitors embedded in plasma reactor walls or sealed inside hive foundations to monitor structural integrity until they finally expire. You effectively become part of the architecture. Being a heavy labor servitor is being condemned to ceaseless toil. There's no pride in a job well done, just another task queued up by your masters. You can't even hope for a fatal heart attack or the sweet release of exhaustion. The augmentics keep your body chugging along well past natural limits. When you do collapse, it's because something vital finally gave out. And by then, you're more machine than man. Anyway, in a way, the heavy labor servitor is the Imperium's work ethic made flesh and steel. Work you to death? Then use your corpse for a bit more work. As dreadful as that sounds, there's a tiny mercy here. At least in your mindless state, you won't fully grasp how nightmarish your life is. The rest of us, watching a lobotomized cyborg shovel radioactive ash until it drops, are left to wonder if maybe a quick execution would have been the kinder choice. 8. Servo Skull, the posthumous pet. Most servitors on this list involve living humans being turned into cyborg slaves, but the Imperium can even conscript you after you're dead by turning your skull into a servo skull. Yes, one of the best outcomes for a beautiful Imperial citizen is to have your cranium scooped out and repurposed as a floating drone. Grimdark doesn't stop at the grave. In fact, for the truly faithful, the work continues. Beyond death, a servo skull is exactly what it sounds like. A human skull, fitted with anti-gravity units, a simple machine spirit coitator, and various sensors or tools. They bob through the air, trailing after their masters like ghastly pet birds. Most are fashioned from the skulls of Imperial adepts, officers or clerks who were deemed worthy of continued service. It's actually considered an honor in some circles, a post-mortem promotion of sorts. Instead of being buried, you're sanctified and wired up to keep doing your duty forever. How sweet. Now, to be fair, if you're at the stage of becoming a servo skull, you, as in your consciousness, are long gone. The skull servitor probably isn't housing your mind or soul. It's more like a remote-controlled drone built out of your remains. So unlike others on this list, a servo skull doesn't suffer. It doesn't truly think or feel at all. That might be a mercy. But it's a pretty disturbing fate for your body. Imagine your final resting place isn't a tomb, but hovering above an inquisitor's shoulder, shining a light on his interrogation notes. Instead of an epitaph, you're fitted with a picked recorder and maybe a hidden las pistol as a surprise weapon. Servo, Schools perform all sorts of tasks. Some carry data slates and parchments behind. Scribes, others act as mobile lamps, literally bearing candles or glow globes. To illuminate a room, there are military variants with built-in guns or injector, needles to serve as tiny assassins. Reconnaissance servo skulls have enhanced OPEX sensors and drift ahead of patrols like ghostly sentries. Inquisitors often have a whole flock of custom servo skulls that can do things like project holothic images or even speak with a synthesized voice, perhaps using a snippet of the original person's vox pattern. Creepy, right? From a darkly comedic perspective, being made into a servo skull is like the Imperium's version of an Employee of the Month award, except you don't get to enjoy it. Congratulations, citizen. Your service record was exemplary. As a reward, we're going to pop your head off and turn it into a floating Roomba. It's the kind of honor that might make you reconsider trying to stand out at work. For the person you were, there's no pain. You're not around to feel anything, but there's a philosophical horror in it. Your skull, perhaps still, bearing scraps of your face, becomes a utilitarian object. People will see it and not think of you at all. You're literally dehumanized into decor. Maybe your friends or family might glance up and recognize that skull hovering by the chandelier, performing its duty with a blank stare. Imagine that funeral instead of a casket. A Margos biolog installs a hovering unit in it. Strangely, some Imperial citizens aspire to this fate. In their minds, serving eternally as a servo skull is a way to aid the Emperor even in death. The cult, Mechanicus, certainly markets it that way. But I'm willing to bet most of us would prefer our rest in peace to involve well resting. At the end of the day, becoming a servo skull might be one of the lighter punishments here. It's quick, just one post-mortem procedure, and then you aren't conscious for the drudgery. But the sheer indignity and macabre absurdity of it earns a place on this list. You effectively become a haunted prop in the Grand Macabre theater of the Imperium, and if the thought of your skull being used as a floating lantern doesn't make you shudder, just wait, the list only gets worse from here. 7. Cherub Servitor Sanctified Horror. If floating skulls weren't unsettling enough, how about a fluttering cyborg baby angel? Cherubim are one of the Imperium's more surreal inventions. Small cherubic servitor, constructs that resemble infants or toddlers with rosy cheeks, chubby limbs, and feathered wings. They coop, they sing hymns. They might even giggle, but make no mistake, they are as soulless and manufactured as any servitor, and the thought of being made into one, as unlikely as that is for an adult human, is the stuff of particularly twisted nightmares. Cherub servitors are usually grown from human genetic material by the Adeptus Mechanicus biologists. They aren't literally kidnapped babies, at least not officially. There are grim legends in the underhives that the stillborn or unwanted orphans sometimes end up as cherub raw material. True or not, just the rumor is enough to make one's skin crawl. Regardless of origin, these constructs are crafted to appear as idealized winged infants from ancient Terran religious art, symbols of purity and innocence to adorn the grand cathedrals and ceremonies of the ecclesiarchy. Of course, the reality is far from pure. Cherubim might look alive and cute at a distance, but up close they're grotesque. Their flesh is pallid and often studded with plug-in ports. Their eyes may be glassy. The wings sprouting from their back might have real feathers, letting them hover with an unnerving steadiness. They wear little loincloths or robes, they're genderless cameas, but to cover power cables and suspensor units humming within. Many have vox grills, marmels implanted where a mouth would be, so they can emit choir hymns or recite prayers in perfect unison. Now imagine, in some horrible hypothetical, that you, a full-grown person, somehow ended up on a Meros biologist's operating slab and they decided to turn you into something like this. No one's literally shrinking adults into babies yet, but humor the thought. Your body reshaped or regrown into a mockery of an angelic infant, brain-wiped and reprogrammed to be an obedient little familiar. You open your eyes and the only thing you know how to do is flutter around a cardinal carrying his scrolls and incense burner chanting Gloria in excelsis Imperator in a sweet childlike voice, even sticking to reality that cherubs are made from cloned embryos or heavily modified infants. The outcome is disturbing enough. If you become a cherub servitor, it means your humanity is gone in a particularly perverse way. You're not a hulking drone or a faceless skull. You're a parody of innocence. Cherubim are often used as living decorations in high imperial masses. Imagine hundreds of them flitting about inside a towering basilica on Terra, raining rose petals and singing with empty smiles. It's a scene equal parts awe-inspiring and horrifying. They do perform practical roles, assisting battle sisters with reloading weapons in combat, fing holy relics, or acting as psychic familiars to inquisitors. Technically, cherubim have the intelligence of a trained pet. They can follow orders, maybe learn simple routines, but they aren't truly sapient. They might giggle and play if their programming calls for it, but there's no real joy or life behind it. Only Servitor logic. So why is this worse than, say, being a servo-skull? It's the uncanny, humiliating nature of the transformation. As a servo-skull, at least you're clearly not human anymore. People treat it like a tool, but as a cherub, you occupy a grotesque middle ground. To devout Imperials, you're a delightful mascot and symbol of holy purity. To anyone with common sense, you're an abomination, a mutilated human form, made to impersonate something pure and sweet. No one deserves to become a doll-like homunculus, flitting about to amuse and assist their masters. This fate mixes body horror with a mockery of innocence. The only mercy here, if it can be called that, is that cherub servitors probably don't realize how obscene their existence is. They smile, because they're programmed to, blissfully ignorant of the grim joke that they represent. In the end, whether that or repurposed, cherubim highlight the absurd cruelty of the 41st Millennium. Even purity itself is mass-produced and weaponized. If you ever see one and feel a chill rather than warmth, well, that's the correct reaction. You're looking at a tiny flying cautionary tale of what serving the Emperor can mean. 6-gun servitor living weapon. Now we move into the line of fire. Literally, gun servitors and their melee cousins, combat servitors, are humans converted into living weapons platforms. If you thought being worked to death in a mine was bad, try being used as a disposable turret on legs. These poor souls are built for war, but denied any of a warrior's glory or honor. They're just guns that happen to have some human bits attached. A typical gun servitor has its arms refashioned into heavy weapon mounts. Picture a hulking figure trudging forward with a heavy bolter, where its right arm should be an ammunition feed leading directly into its torso. Its left arm might end in a brutish power fist or a clamping vise useful for stabilizing recoil or bashing close enemies. Its eyes are replaced with targeting optics, glowing red bionic lenses scanning for targets. Or maybe one eye is now a laser rangefinder. Hearing protection not necessary when you don't have the wits to flinch at the thunder of your own gun. These servitors are often deployed as support for Adeptus Mechanicus legions or Astra Militarum engine seers. A tech priest on the battlefield might have a pair of gun servitors lumbering at his sides, ready to lay down suppressive fire while he repairs a tank under fire. In the dim corridors of a void ship or the vaults of an inquisitor's fortress, gun servitors stand guard as silent sentinels until their OPEX sensors pick up an intruder, at which point they unleash a storm of fire without hesitation or fear. One of the most feared examples are the Praetorian servitors. These are essentially elite gun servitors, heavily armored, heavily armed, and absolutely terrifying to behold. Many Praetorians are built from ogrins, massive abhuman brutes, or vat-grown giant humanoids to give them extra bulk. They might mount multiple weapons. Imagine a two-legged weapons platform bristling with a pair of rotor cannons for arms, a flamethrower nozzle, where its mouth used to be, and shoulder rack missile launchers for good measure. Their flesh, whatever remains, is buried under slabs of ceramite plating and hydraulic bracings, turning them into noun unstoppable guard dogs for the Mechanicus or the Inquisition. If a tech malos needs a sacred vault or forge, temple defended, you aren't a space marine with purpose or even a frightened conscript with comrades. You're just an automaton following target lock protocols. You'll trudge straight into incoming fire with no sense of self-preservation, returning fire until either your target or you are destroyed. If an explosion shears your legs off, you might simply collapse in place and continue firing from the ground until the last flicker of life leaves your body. This is war, reduced to mechanical routine. There are anecdotal battlefield accounts of the occasional glitch in a gun servitor's behavior, perhaps a tiny ghost of the human it was. One story tells of an ancient gun servitor that after mowing down a wave of charging cultists, briefly ceased fire and began reciting an incoherent litany over the corpses. Was it some fragment of its old mind, experiencing remorse or prayer, or just a scrambled circuit? Hard to say. The tech priests promptly shuffled it back to the reservicing bay for adjustment. Of course, the life of a gun servitor is violent, but ironically straightforward. Unlike a living soldier, you won't feel fear or pain beyond raw damage, feedback, or guilt. Those parts of your brain are likely surgically cut out or permanently sedated. The tragedy is more for those who remember you were once human, Comrades in arms might share a quick, pitying glance when a heavy bolter servitor catches a last bolt to the face and collapses like a puppet with its strings cut. But in the next breath, they're ducking behind its smoking carcass for cover because the fight rages on. In the hierarchy of horrors, being a mindless gun isn't the absolute bottom. At least your own suffering is minimal since you lack awareness. But it's a grim end for any human life. You're transformed into a chunk of military hardware. When there's no battle to fight, you're likely powered down and stored in a closet or chained to a wall until needed again. Like an awkward piece of equipment. You don't even get the soldier's solace of camaraderie or a cause to die for. You are the cause. Literally just a weapon with no more say in things than a last gun or a hand grenade. In the end, gun servitors personify the Imperium's grim pragmatism. Life is cheap, so slap a gun on it and use it up. For the poor soul. Inside, it's arguable that nothing of you remains to comprehend the indignity. But to any outside observer, it's a fate as ghoulish as any. Your only purpose to kill and eventually be killed. An interchangeable cog in the eternal meat. Grinder of War. 5. Choir Servitor. The Song of Pain. Warhammer 40k isn't content to just break your body. It will happily break your spirit and dignity in the name of piety too. Enter the choir. Servitors, one of the eeriest and most tragic sights in the Imperium. These are human beings who have been mutilated and cybernetically linked together for the sole purpose of singing praises to the Emperor or otherwise using their voices as instruments. Their eyes are often gouged out or covered with iron caps. They don't need to see their audience. Multiple servitors are then wired together, neural implants syncing them so they can sing in perfect unison. They don't have lyrics or independent thoughts. Instead, sacred hymns or droning chants are programmed into their cortex. Picture a grand cathedral on a hive world, towering Gothic spires, incense smoke curling in the air, and from some hidden loft or crypt comes an ethereal chant, a dozen human voices, sustaining a perfect angelic chord for hours on end. It sounds divine until you see the source. In a dank chamber, a group of emaciated cyborg torsos hang like butchered meat, tubes running from their throats to amplify the sound. Their heads are lolling, maybe bolted in place. Their mouths are open in unison, producing a haunting harmony. They will continue like this until ordered to stop, or until their bodies literally give out from the strain. Some choir servitors called cantor servitors or organ servitors are even integrated into musical instruments. There's a chilling tale of a colossal pipe organ in a shrine world basilica where each pipe has a servitor permanently attached. Their lungs push the air and their modified vocal tracks produce the tone. The organist presses a key and a human voice, or what's left of it, belts out the corresponding note sustained by unholy stamina. The congregation hears the booming music and thinks it the voice of the Emperor's angels, not realizing the angels are actually mutilated sinners in the instrument. Then there are penance choirs, groups of mobile choir servitors wheeled out for public penance ceremonies or battlefield morale boosting. They might be mounted on a crawler, dozens of limbless torsos, with vox amplifiers broadcasting hallelujah across the front lines. 2. The faithful troops. It's an inspirational if eerie sound. To the enemy. Well, hearing the unwavering drone of a dozen synced human voices, not taking a single breath can be deeply unnerving. What makes this fate one of the worst is the theological cruelty of it. It's not enough that you're neutralized as a threat. You're made into a living instrument of the faith. You transgressed. The ecclesiarchy essentially says that voice which spoke heresy will repurpose it to sing praises. Instead, it's a deeply personal violation, taking the human gift of song as peace speech and perverting it into an automated, unceasing prayer machine. Are choir servitors conscious in any way? Emperor, we hope not. The whole point is to erase their mind. But the horror comes from imagining if even a scrap of awareness lingers. Picture some tiny corner of your mind still alive in there, forced to experience your body producing beautiful music while you're internally screaming for it to stop. You can't control your lungs or voice. The machine does that now. You can't beg for mercy. Your mouth only produces hallelujah on loop. Disturbingly, the Adeptus Mechanicus itself has reportedly balked at some uses of servitors like this. They have a concept of the obliviate servitor, one utterly devoid of cognition, a soulless automaton which the Mechanicus only grudgingly allows because the ecclesiarchy and inquisition push for it. Think about that. The tech priests, who turn people into robots daily, actually consider wiping every last trace of humanity a form of tech heresy. Even they say this is too much. It's basically making a machine out of a soul. But under pressure from the zealots, they do it anyway. If the guys who build murder cyborgs find the choir servitor idea a bit much, you know it's bad. So the next time you're in a cathedral and hear the heavenly chorus, remember those might not be willing monks singing. They could be what's left of the last batch of blasphemers now condemned to an existence of perpetual worship. There's a macabre irony fit for 40k. Voices raised in joyous song, produced by utterly joyless means. As far as fates go, becoming a human hymn is one that strikes at something uniquely human. Our voice, our autonomy. The Emperor may appreciate the devotion, but one suspects even he might cringe at the method. 4. Astartes Servitor, fallen angels. It's one thing for a regular human to be turned into a Servitor. It's another for one of the Emperor's mighty space marines, those transhuman angels of death, to suffer that fate. Yes, even the superhuman artists can end up as lobotomized servitors in certain dire circumstances. If ever there was a fall from grace in the 41st millennium, this is it. Space. Marines normally live and die with honor. When they fall, their bodies are entombed with reverence or their gene seed is reclaimed to continue their lineage. But some chapters have punishments worse than death for brethren who betray their oaths or fail catastrophically. Instead of execution, they strip the Marine of his very being and repurpose him as a servitor. Imagine a 90 ft tall power-armored hero of humanity being dragged before his chapter's chaplain in disgrace and walking out a hollow shell destined for menial labor. The thought is chilling, even to other space marines who would far prefer a bolt round to the skull. One infamous example involves the Iron Hands and their successor chapters. These Iron Hands, obsessed with the weakness of flesh, are rumored to sentence certain grievous offenders to servitude. A battle brother who showed deadly incompetence or perhaps heretical leanings might wake up from a medical evaluation to find his limbs replaced with industrial tools and his mind purged of pride and personhood. There he goes, a towering servitor hauling supply crates in the depths of the chapter's fortress monastery, a silent, lumbering example to all who see him that weakness will not be tolerated. The Black Templars offer another grim instance. Their zeal is legendary, but not every recruit lives up to the chapter's exacting standards. Those Neophytes initiates who fail their trials or disappoint their superiors don't just get reassigned or dismissed. Often they become Cenobite servitors. These servitors accompany Black Templar chaplain carrying holy relics, scrolls, and banner poles into battle, chanting prayers of penitence in Binharic code. The horrifying part, many Cenobite servitors were once young men who aspired to be full space marines. Instead, they are literally shackled to the role of mindless altar-bearers. For the chapter they yearn to serve. High Marshal Helre, or the famed chaplain Grimaldus, might stride into combat flanked by robed, misshapen servitors lugging sacred items, each one a failed recruit now bound in servitude. Talk about adding insult to injury. You were not worthy to join our ranks, so now you'll spend your life carrying our luggage and reciting litanies with no mind of your own to know the difference. Even those aspirants who never donned power armor can meet this fate. Many youths die or suffer brain death when their bodies reject the gene seed implants during initiation. Most chapters mercifully lay those unfortunates to rest, but a few see an opportunity instead. These aspiring Marines were strong and fit. They made it to initiation after all. If their higher brain function is gone but the body lives, why waste it? Install some cybernetic control and presto, a new heavy lifter servitor for the chapter. Halls. In a cruel twist, the boy who dreamed of becoming a mighty warrior for the Emperor ends up a mute, muscled janitor polishing the arming chamber floors. From the perspective of a Marine who undergoes this, it's hard to say how much awareness is left. Ideally for them, none at all. The gift of ignorance, if you will. The true cruelty of this punishment is mostly for those who witness it or know the story. It hangs like a specter over every artist. Even you, the Emperor's chosen, could be reduced to a slab of meat and metal if you falter in your duty. It's one hell of a deterrent. Among such chapters, 1 imagines discipline is absolute. Step out of line and your brothers will condemn you to a fate you consider worse than death. For outsiders who come across a former RT servitor, it's a pitiful and unsettling sight. That towering figure shambling by with servo arms and blank eyes. He once wore the sacred power armor and bolter. Perhaps his armor, scrubbed of heraldry, still serves as an empty suit in the chapter armory, while he cleans the floors he once marched upon. It's like seeing a noble eagle with its wings clipped, pulling a plow like a common ox. In the grim logic of the Imperium, it's efficient. Waste nothing, use everything. But on a personal level, it's tragic beyond words. In terms of worse than death, this ranks very high. Space Marines are more than just soldiers. Their whole identity is honor, loyalty, strength. To take one of these exemplars and break him into a mindless slave is a shock to the entire system of values they live by. It's a fate so extreme that it's rarely mentioned in law. Perhaps because even the chroniclers find it distasteful. But it does happen according to the records of certain unforgiving chapters. So, if you find yourself on the path to becoming an artist, here's a tip. Be very good at it. Because if you fail in certain corners of the galaxy, they won't send you home. They'll laboise you and make you mop the chapel floors for the rest of your days. In the 41st millennium, the penalty for letting down your immortal battle brothers may just be living on as the chapter's most shameful secret. A servitor in a black habit, a fallen angel bound in chains of flesh and iron. 3. Heretic's plaything, Dark Mechanicus Servitor. Up to now, we've been exploring fates dished out by the Imperium. But what happens if the ones turning you into a servitor aren't bound by even the thin pretense of imperial morality? Enter the Dark Mechanicus and other heretical techri. Writes, if you fall into their hands, you'll beg for the Emperor's mercy. But you'll find only madness. The Dark Mechanicus are those tech priests who have thrown in their lot with chaos or otherwise broken away from the cult Mechanicus's strictures. They still tinker with flesh and steel, but without any of the tabos or limits that barely restrain their loyalist counterparts. Human lives, just raw material, machine spirits. Why not toss a demon in there instead? The results are some of the most nightmarish servitor creations imaginable. One infamous example is the Sank Redemption Servitor, a specialty of the Dark Mechanicum on the corrupted forge world of Samk. Ostensibly these were created as punishment for criminals in their society. Yes, even renegade tech lords have to keep the rabble in line. In practice, they are roaming murder machines. A redemption servitor gets its limbs removed and replaced with spidery mechanical appendages that allow it to skitter through wreckage and narrow crawl spaces. It's outfitted with plasma cutters and saws for dismembering, salvaging purposes, and often an array of clawed tendrils. The supposed idea is that they autonomously scavenge battlefields and ruins for valuable scrap and technology, literally hunting down machinery to drag back to their masters. Now pause and consider an autonomous servitor driven by an implanted hunger for certain materials. That means the poor wretch of a human inside isn't fully gone. Some spark of desire and decision-making is left or engineered from scratch. Essentially, they turned a person into a monster that wants to do its horrific task. These redemption servitors prowl like feral animals. There are terrifying tales of them hiding in the shadows of underhive junkyards, emitting eerie metallic shrieks, then pouncing on unsuspecting loners. Not to eat them, but to tear off any useful cybernetic implants or tech devices. The victim has a bionic arm, a functioning last gun, a data slate. All pray for the servitor's programming to claim. Imagine being trapped in that metal-riddled body, compelled by an unnatural craving to harvest machinery, even if it means ripping through living people to get it. And it doesn't stop at that one pattern. The Dark Mechanicists love to experiment. They aren't bound by the Council of Terror or Mars's rules against true AI or Xenos tech. So maybe a deranged Margos decides to wire a demonic intellect into a human servitor chassis, creating a shrieking fusion of unholy spirit and flesh, bound to serve until the unstable combo inevitably self-destructs in gore and hellfire. Or they splice alien DNA and human together in a servitor to see what happens. Rumors persist of labs where heretics tried grafting on orc limbs or elder senses to human servitors, producing abominable hybrids that lived in constant agony until they mercifully fell apart or were destroyed. For the victim, let's say you unlucky soul, it's a roulette wheel of horrors. Perhaps the herech just needs more drudge workers and you get the standard lobotomy plus cyber shovel treatment. Still awful, but par for the course. Or maybe you catch the eye of a deranged Tekkent who has a grand idea. Fuse your nervous system with a fragment of a Silica Animus forbidden AI just to see if he can make a more efficient syncing servitor. Next thing you know, he's uploading scrap code directly into your brain. Your last coherent thought is drowned out by a flood of binary commands and maybe the whispers of something alive in the data. You wake up as something not even the Mechanicus would dare create. A half AI, half human. Thus every bit of your flesh and soul controlled by an algorithm that cares nothing for pain or sanity. Unlike Imperial servitors which at least pretend there's some higher purpose serve the Emperor.